Hello, this is Patrick Barnard in Montreal. It is July 23, 2026. This is the 39th edition of the International Press Review. And today we're going to be talking about the renewed tariff threats, tariff bullying by the United States against Canada, and the fundamental issue that I think this raises, and that is the loss of trust in the United States. Here is how the new threats of 50% tariffs on a number of Canadian industries looked on Canadian television this week. The faces you will see are in this order: Andrew Nicholls, the CBC TV presenter, then Prime Minister Mark Carney of Canada, and then the Premier of Ontario, Doug Ford.
Are sending shockwaves across this country. The tariffs target goods ranging from cement to milk and wine, hockey sticks, and even wigs. Trump himself is saying some by now familiar things about dealing with Canada, while the Prime Minister and Premiers appear focused on how to deal with Trump's threats.
As always, Canadians, governments, business, labor will stand together to build Canada strong and to have a trading relationship with our North American partners that benefits everyone.
Canada's been very, very tough on us over the years, for many years, and no other president's done anything about it.
He wants to continue threatening, and he's nothing but a bully. That's all he is. And you have to stand up to the bullies in the schoolyard, or they end up taking your lunch money.
Part of the thing that is angering Canadians, but people around the world as well, is the almost pathetic arrogance of Donald Trump. His message is, you are nothing without us.
Their leadership, from Trudeau to the current leadership, in all fairness to them, they need us to survive. Without us, there's no way they can survive.
Imagine for a moment that the world applied this same logic, but in reverse. Imagine a world saying to the United States, without us, you will be nothing. Of course, that isn't happening, and we are not there. But we could be at some future point. That's something that Donald Trump appears not to have allowed to enter his imagination. At this particular time, the summer of 2026, the United States is still attacking the world with tariffs. The latest news is that there'll be a 10% tariff, perhaps a higher one, placed on 60 countries around the world. The irony here is that these tariffs are accomplishing very little. Major manufacturing is not really returning to the United States. The tariffs are adding, it is estimated, about 1.5 percentage points to the U.S. cost of living, if not more. So what is actually taking place? Well, for Canada, Prime Minister Mark Carney has the job of walking a very fine line between maintaining relations with Donald Trump and at the same time attempting to diversify the Canadian economy in terms of its export trade. The Trump tariffs and threats of tariffs are part of an attack on the Canadian economy, but also an attack on U.S. consumers. Because the Canadian and American economies are so tightly connected, the tariffs actually cost American consumers money. As Prime Minister Carney of Canada said in his July 20th statement about this issue, this trade dispute has raised costs for families, particularly in the U.S.
President Trump reigniting the trade war with Canada. I guess it's been igniting further the trade war with Canada, 50% tariffs on certain Canadian goods. Explain to people how big a deal this is.
This is a surprisingly big deal, actually. And it's fitting this as part of your series on the cost of living crisis, because it just got a little bit harder for everyone. And by the way, I really do want to compliment you on the important work that you're doing there. Look, let me explain the background. The president has been batting around Canada like a cat who's just found a mouse. He's been doing it for years now. He came to power when NAFTA was the trade agreement that had originally been negotiated by Clinton. He tore that up. He renegotiated it. He then came to power a second time. He tore it up. He renegotiated. In fact, one of his first acts as president was aggressive tariffs against, can you believe it, Canada, of all the countries in the world. And recently we'd gotten to a nice piece. And in that piece, basically the president had a bunch of silly tariffs, But overall, he said anything that was under our existing free trade agreement. I want to repeat, the United States has an existing free trade agreement with Canada. Previously, anything that was under that was exempt, which meant that most of our trade with Canada was just continuing along nicely. What the president has done here is dramatically different. He said there's no longer an exemption for anything that was covered by our existing free trade agreement. He's literally got 14 pages of different goods that he's now imposing this 50% tariff on, which is a tax on Americans who buy goods from Canada.
The man you've just heard talking to CNN is Justin Wolfers, an Australian-American professor of economics at the University of Michigan, someone who's quite frequently heard on mainstream media and also posts clips on social media. This second part of the press review here involves two more economic voices, if I can use that term. The first belongs to Chrystia Freeland. She's an exceptionally brilliant woman. She was the former Deputy Prime Minister of the Government of Canada. She's since left that post. She's now the CEO of the Rhodes Trust in London, very well known in the Anglosphere. Chrystia Freeland, for a number of years, was the Moscow chief of the Financial Times. She speaks 5 languages, including Russian and Ukrainian. Mr. Trump calls her a nasty woman because she negotiated the last free trade agreement between Canada, the United States, and Mexico, and did a very good job of it. And for that reason, Trump has called her nasty. The visual that you see now on your screen is the op-ed that Chrystia Freeland wrote for the Financial Times, her old paper, on July 21st, 2026. In it, obviously, she makes an argument directed towards Prime Minister Carney and his trade negotiators, and that message is hang tough. She makes 3 points. Number one, retaliation in these tough kind of trade negotiations is very useful. It's important. Don't shy away from it. In other words, counter tariffs. The second point she makes is that the United States is very good at capitalism, but not very good at what she calls central planning. And here she's thinking of decisions about trade and what to do about it. And the third point she makes is that the allies of the United States, Canada and many others, are struck with a sense of enormous disappointment and disloyalty, the disloyalty of the United States towards its traditional allies. And she is warning, obviously, that the United States risks losing for a long time trust that will be very important to the USA. The second economic voice that I would like to use to end this press review belongs to Paul Krugman. He's that famous economist who won the Nobel Prize, expert in international trade. For many years, he wrote a column for the New York Times. Then he left the New York Times. Now he puts out a newsletter on Substack. Every time it appears, it's read by approximately 400,000 people. And he published a little op-ed in his Substack on July 21st about these tariffs. He said that he really thought they were very silly, really a temper tantrum was what he called it. He said they would hurt U.S. consumers. And then he put up a logo from the White House, "Welcome to the Golden Age." And I was very struck by the way he ended his Substack. "Well," said Krugman, "I don't see a golden age. I see an America that has become an ineffectual bully, sicker, poorer, and riven by political extremism, with no friends anywhere in the world." That's how Krugman ended that Substack. And that, I think, is the great danger facing the United States, a new kind of diplomatic, political isolation, self-made, self-proclaimed.